In today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different to what we normally do. Today, we're doing a POV drive in the Lamborghini Gallardo Superleggera LP570-4 Edizione Tecnica. And yes, despite what some people in the comments might have said, there was actually a version of the Gallardo that did end in the word Tecnica. And there it is. The E-Gear gearbox is a gearbox that just about everybody hates. In fact, just about any single clutch gearbox gets hate on the internet. And I actually love the gearbox in this. In fact, it was one of the reasons why I bought the car. So let's jump in and tell you why I think the internet is wrong and why the E-Gear gearbox, in my opinion, is the more engaging drive than the DCT. Let's get to it.
The bar raising, we keep moving it up. Ain't no surprises here, they knew it was us. Apologies if I was doing too much. I got fake restored, why you pushing the brakes? I ain't full of myself, boy, I'm full of mistakes.
Now, this is where the E-Gear gearbox does struggle a little bit when it comes to just poodling along. However, that's not what this car is designed for. This car is not a smooth rolling city car, is it? It is a supercar. It is meant to be an engaging drive. So let's talk a little bit about why I think that a lot of people don't really understand the gearbox, and that's why they hate them. But if they took a moment to really wrap their head around it, I think they'd learn to love it just like I do. Right now, I'm in manual, but not going to be using sport mode just yet. There's also the Corsa mode. Now, Corsa, translated from Italian, is race. So in race mode, the gear shifts do improve in a number of ways that I particularly like, and it just makes for a more engaging experience, and I'll explain why in a minute. And if you're wondering what this is on my head, it is the camera used for the POV. This is a GO3S. It's a 4K action camera. So I'm able to record this particular sequence in 4K with the tiniest camera rather than a huge bulky GoPro on my head with a elasticated strap. Nope, this is just clipped to my cap, and to be honest, I barely notice it's even there. This was actually sent to me by Insta360 for a video that they're sponsoring next month, but I thought I'd try it out today, and if the video worked out okay, I might as well publish it. And while this video isn't sponsored, if you do choose to get one, I've left a link in the description where you'll actually get a free accessory subject to where you're buying from. Anyway, back to the POV and why I am talking about the single clutch gearbox. Now, one of the things that I think we should probably talk about first is what is a single clutch gearbox and what is a double clutch gearbox? Because right now, most supercars come with double clutch gearboxes. Now, the single clutch robotized manual gearboxes came about mainly in the 90s. The first one I personally heard of was the Ferrari F1 gearbox and then the BMW SMG. The SMG gearbox and the F1 gearboxes were kind of notorious for being a little bit clunky. Now, this particular car is a 2013 model, so obviously the technology had improved by then. Cars like the 430 Scuderia were still using the single clutch gearboxes, and I will touch upon that in a minute. The reason why there was a demand for this particular style of gearbox was because people wanted that race car experience in their supercars. You know, the paddles on the steering wheel, being able to click, 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 go through the gears, you know, the F1 experience. So, what do? Well, at the time, automatic gearboxes would have been the other option, but frankly, they just weren't that great at handling high power. They were all designed for ease and comfort. So there was no way that an Autobox was going to go into something like this or a Ferrari of its time. The gearboxes that could handle the power at the time were manual gearboxes. They had been tried and tested, but of course a manual gearbox is slow and it doesn't have paddles. You have to move through an H pattern. Of course there were sequential boxes available, but they were generally just used in race cars, and that would have probably been completely unusable on the road. So people had the idea of creating a robotized manual, which many of us today will refer to as a single clutch automated gearbox. What that means is the internals of the gearbox were still the same manual gearbox. In order to make them faster, what they decided to do was use a computer to decide when the gears were changed, and a robotic system that would operate the clutch and the movement of the gears, replacing the delay created by human intervention. And yeah, the first gearboxes weren't that great because no new technology is particularly good. However, over time, they were improved considerably, and I think the peak of the single clutch gearbox was probably in the 430 Scuderia.
Now's a good time for me to ask you to help me out by hitting that subscribe button, as we're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers, and also consider our membership program where you get access to exclusive content and more.
So what are the downsides of a single clutch gearbox? Well, the downside is that the robotic operation of the clutch and the gear shifts, while fast, isn't always particularly comfortable. So the computer is always trying to kind of manage the operation of the clutch to smooth things out when you're in normal mode, but it's never going to be as smooth as an automatic. And this is where DCTs, or double clutch transmissions, come into their own, because they can be fast and smooth. And the reason for that is this. With a double clutch gearbox, it's also operated robotically and using a computer, but what they do is it pre-selects the next gear with the second clutch disengaged, with the first clutch engaged in the gear you're using. If you're accelerating, it knows that you're probably going to go up a gear. If you brake, it knows you're probably going to go down a gear. So it will adjust the gear that it's pre-selected based on what you're doing with the car. What that means is the speed of the shift is dramatically increased simply because it's a case of disengaging one clutch and engaging the other clutch microseconds apart. That creates a very fast shift, but it also allows it to be a lot smoother than the single clutch operation. Now, what that does is that creates an almost automatic gearbox-like experience when you're doing low speeds, but then it provides a super fast shift at higher speeds. The thing you give up with that is the drama. It's just not as dramatic a shift as the single clutch. So that, for me, reduces the engagement of the particular gearbox. With the single clutch, what you'll find is that you can actually enjoy a slightly smoother driving experience if you kind of drive it half like a manual. Essentially what you'll do is, as you're driving along, as you shift, you just give a little lift on the throttle, and that takes a little bit of the torque away, and then you squeeze the throttle back on just as you feel the gear actually shift up. For me, that is no big deal. I mean, saying that that makes this car worse is like saying, well, a manual is worse than an automated DCT. Sure, it's slower, but is it worse? I mean, everybody raves about the engagement you get from a manual gearbox, so I don't think faster is always better. In fact, the manual gear shift is the slowest out of all three, and despite that, well, it's the most engaging. It's the one that we all love the most. But here we are, I'm just cruising along. I never use auto. Honestly, just don't use auto in the E-Gear or the R-Tronic, which, by the way, I also have an R8 GT Spider, if you haven't watched the channel before, and that also has R-Tronic gearbox, which is essentially the same as the E-Gear, just mapped slightly differently. But I have touched upon a key point that, you know, look, in town, a manual gearbox is a pain. And if you're buying a city car to commute from point A to point B, get yourself a nice, comfortable, easy to drive car. Something built for the city. It's like buying a supercar and saying, oh, I have to crouch down too low to get in the car. Well, don't get a supercar then, get an SUV. If I'm buying a supercar, I want a race car for the road experience. That's what I am interested in. I want to feel like I am driving something that is meant to be on a racetrack. Obviously, some people might not want that. Some people might prefer something that's more like a GT cruiser. And there are cars that are more of an all-rounder, like, for example, the standard R8s. Not the GTs, they're a little bit more raw, but the standard R8s, they're kind of like a blend of supercar and GT car. You can kind of use them in both ways, and that's fine if you want that. But a car like this, the Superleggera and the GT, are not meant to be comfy cruisers. They are meant to be track toys that you can drive on the road. And I'm going to get ready by putting it into sport mode. I think the roads have dried out a little bit, and we're going to pull up at this traffic light and just see what it's like when it pulls away. Because that's often what people are concerned with. Now, you'll notice I put it straight into neutral. You've really got to drive this like it's a manual. When you stop, the best thing for the gearbox and the clutch is to put it into neutral. And even in your manual, that is the best thing to do. Put it into neutral, foot on the brake, or put your handbrake on, either way. And the reason for that is you're putting wear on parts that don't need additional wear while you're held stationary. In fact, right now, I can probably take my foot off the brake and leave the handbrake on before I have to head off. Exactly the same operation in a manual, but nonetheless, a manual is more engaging. So let's talk a little bit about why I think the single clutch gearboxes, like the E-Gear, like the R-Tronic, particularly on the GT, and the Ferrari F1 box on the Scuderia 430, in my opinion, are more engaging to drive. So the fact is that if you do want to drive a little more smoothly in one of these single clutch gearboxes, you do need to, as I said, drive it a bit like a manual. Like, you can't get in the car, see that it's got some paddles to select the gears, and just treat it like it's an automatic, because that's not how it works. It's not what's going on internally, and that's having zero mechanical sympathy. And I know, as a driving enthusiast, you're all about mechanical sympathy. The other way I think it's engaging is once you've got it into sport mode or Corsa, which I will do in a minute, what you'll notice once you get the car under load, the way that it kicks you in the back is just like a whole other thing. It's not smooth. You're driving a race car. Now, I have actually driven a couple of race cars, and they all had sequential gearboxes, and that is the same experience you get with a sequential gearbox. It's phenomenal. Now, of course, this is a road car and not a race car, but to me, the point of the Superleggera is that it feels like a race car for the road. Obviously, a race car is even more harsh, but if you want that sequential box racing driver experience of a car tuned more for the road than for the track, then this is the kind of car that you want. And this is why I love the single clutch boxes. Bear in mind that a lot of the R8 gearboxes were mapped differently to the Lamborghini ones, so it is a slightly different experience. And I will be honest, they are a little bit, let's just say they need a little bit more getting used to in order to get the best out of them. But right, look, we've got a stretch of road here we can actually use. So once you get the car under load, you can actually start to use the gears, and they are much faster in sport mode. Now, Corsa, which of course I will have to be a little bit careful with because of the reduced ESC. Now this is a whole other thing. This, when you're gear shifting under load, gives you a proper, kick in the back. And in my case, the cap hit the seat back and knocked my head forward in the process. But look, it's not meant to be comfortable. It's meant to be an engaging experience. Now, there we go. That is what I'm talking about. The shifts, they just kick you in the back. Now, some people might not like that. I get it. I get it. It might not be your cup of tea. But that doesn't mean the gearbox is bad, any more than if you don't like driving a manual and you prefer to drive a DCT, it doesn't mean manuals are bad. Most people would say manuals are better, and I think that is a significant part of why everybody hates on the single clutch gearboxes. The reason that they hate on the single clutch gearboxes is because everyone else does. Half the people that I hear complaining about the single clutch gearboxes, when I ask them, which ones have you driven? They haven't driven any. They're just going off of what people on the internet have said. And then a few people that I speak to who have actually driven them and just prefer the DCTs, I'm like, well, obviously you prefer a smoother driving experience. And that's okay. We can all have our different preferences. For me, I love a manual. I've got 2 manual cars actually, one of them you haven't seen yet. And I love driving them. Totally wonderful to do, engaging. This is a different experience. And for me, if I get to choose between a DCT and this, I'm gonna choose this. Not because it's faster, but it's better. It's better as a driving experience. It's better for the sense of engagement and connection you feel with the car. It's better because that kick in the back is nothing short of absolutely exhilarating.
So in short, I think the real reason that a lot of people hate on single clutch gearboxes is just because the rest of the internet's been hating on them for so long. I think it all started in the early days when people got their hands on these cars, saw a drive selector and a paddle shift and just thought, well, I'm expecting this to be as refined as an automatic gearbox, when their expectations should have been that it was going to behave like something in between an automatic and a race sequential. Not quite as harsh as a race sequential and not quite as refined as an automatic. Now, for where we are today, no one will deny that the double clutch boxes are the fastest and best if what you want are bragging rights for your 0 to 60 times. But the happy medium with a usable race car-esque experience with more engagement than a DCT while being faster than a manual is the single clutch experience. And that's why I've come to love the gearbox that the internet loves to hate.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this little POV drive, and if you did, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, choose notifications for all videos, and I'll see you next time on Sports and Touring.